still traveling, and Risa's at Chabad because they're doing a big Tu B'Shvat event. So I think we'll just get going.
Okay, very nice.
Okay, so this is like all of these. It's an interesting chapter. Let me open to it in here actually, because there's a few psukim that really are hard to make heads or tails of, and Art Scroll is clear, at least in ways that it's clear and literal, even if it's whatever. Okay, good. So we're starting chapter 5. There it is. Al tava'el al picha v'libcha al yimaher lahotzi davar lifnei ha'elihim ki ha'elihim b'shamayim ve'ato al ha'oretz al kein yihiu dvarecha me'atin. So don't be so quick to speak, and don't be quick in your heart to speak, to say something in front of God, which often denotes in the Mikdash, but doesn't have to, right? So this could be a much more literal thing about taking oaths. Be careful about taking oaths in the temple, which we'll see later in the chapter is more explicit. But again, also we're always in front of God, so be careful with how much you speak, with what you say. Because God's in heaven, ve'ato al ha'aretz, and you're on the earth. Al kein yihu divarecha me'atim. So for that reason, your words should be few. Right? There's a Mishnah in Avos. I should have looked it up, but there's a Mishnah in Avos. Right? I grew up among the Chachamim, and I found that silence was the best guard of wisdom, something like this. Right? There's an idea of not being so quick and being thoughtful about what you say, and don't be rash with it. The other thing that I thought was interesting about this pasuk is that right, it emphasizes that God is in heaven and you're on earth. I think part of that is speaking to the fact that our perspective is limited. So like, be careful with the conclusions that you draw, be careful with the assertions that you make, because at the end of the day, our perception is limited, and like God knows everything. So be careful on that in that sense. That's sort of what jumped out to me. Givoha chalom berov inyan. Right, dreams come with many matters, with many subjects. V'kol ksil berov dvarim, and the voice of a fool comes with a lot of different words. Right, so that one's interesting. Right, he doesn't seem to have a very positive view of dreams in this chapter. But I'll tell you what I sort of, before I ask you what you guys, no, you know what? First, what do you guys make of this puzzle? Right, the comparison here is between dreams, which have a lot of different matters, and fools that speak a lot. Any thoughts on that? We have, oh, Judy.
Judy's there.
Yeah.
Oh, good. Well, I'll tell you, my take is, yeah, it's going back to what you said about the first verse. It's a deep skepticism about
Judy.
our status and our amount of knowledge. And
Yeah.
we're being approached from every direction in every way. And you should be very wary about what you think you're being told and understood. And even from your dreams. Dreams will point you in a million directions. None of them exactly fruitful.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Good. Judy, we're 2 verses into chapter 5. So we
2 verses in? Okay, thanks.
Yeah, here's
Hi.
Hi, Cressel.
Hi.
Nice to see you.
how's the Caribbean? Good?
It's really great.
Good, good.
Yeah, we're almost done.
Great.
It's fun.
This Seder. So yeah, so Ethan, I agree with you. That what jumped out to me is that dreams have a lot of subjects. They're usually disjointed, right? It jumps from one thing to the next. And so I think on a very surface level, he is just sort of saying fools speak this way and that way all the time. But I'd like to say that the comparison is more about the fact that someone who's foolish is going to be talking about a million different things. One doesn't have to do with the next. Or it's a very tenuous connection. The Seder.
So
yeah.
Chalom, that's like a sleeping type dream, but
okay.
Like in American, it means also fantasy.
Okay,
So do we, is there a word like that, like wish, like that would be a different word in Hebrew?
I think so. I think so. You're saying like, because it's good to have a dream, right? It's good to have
Yeah,
dreams. Yeah,
It's kind of like the main number one thing for
Good.
most people.
good, right. You have to have dreams. I agree with you. I don't think he's talking about, oh, dreams are foolish. I think he's talking about that when you sleep, the dreams that you have literally when you sleep, it jumps from this thing to the next thing to the next thing. But I agree with you. To have aspirations, it's a good thing. That's a good thing. And I don't think Shlomo is going to come against that. Maybe in Hebrew you would say tikva, right? Like in the Israeli national anthem, the way that they talk about tikva is more as like a lofty aspiration. So
It's much more positive.
sure. Okay, good. So in verse 3, now we're going to get more explicitly into vows, right? Kasher tidor neder lelohim, when you make a vow to God, al ta'acher l'shalmo, don't be slow to repay it or to fulfill it. Ki ein chayfetz baksilim, right? Here's the word chayfetz again, but here it's being used in its more classical sense. Ki ein chayfetz baksilim, God doesn't desire fools. God doesn't suffer fools. Eis asher tidor shalem, whatever you vow, pay, right? Fulfill it, fulfill your vows. Now, again, this used to be a much bigger part of life than it is now. Still, there's still plenty of good moral lessons to be taken from this in our day. Namely, be careful with your words, be careful with your vows. It's still possible to take a vow. Don't do that lightly. And in fact, the rabbis in general are pretty against taking vows, except for very exceptional circumstances. But this used to be a thing, taking pledges in the temple to give a certain sacrifice, vowing not to benefit from a particular food item or something like that. This used to be a much bigger part of religious life. Says Shlomo, don't be reckless with it. And when you do it, you got to make sure to fulfill your word, right? He says in Pasuk 4, Tov asher lo sidor, better you shouldn't have taken any vow, Misha tidor velo sishalim. It's better to have never taken a vow in the first place than to take a vow and then to not fulfill it, right? This is why the Chazal in general are very careful about vows and really kind of discourage it in most circumstances.
Rabbi, I'm looking at the translation Mecho Mamre, and Chafetz is translated as no pleasure. What does your translation say about Chafetz?
Art Scroll here says no liking for fools. And JPS says like Machon Mamre, they say had no pleasure in fools. I think they both still tie into Chayfetz as a desire. Later in the chapter, we're going to see, keep an eye out for it. We'll see Chayfetz again, but there it's probably being used like it was being used in the previous chapter.
Okay.
So that's what I meant by Shalom.
Yeah.
That's more negative.
Chayfetz is neutral, I think,
Oh.
but it's a desire usually. Usually it means some sort of desire. So here, God takes no pleasure in the foolish, or God doesn't want the foolish. Yeah. Okay. Okay, cool. Okay, good. Pasuk hey, the 5th verse. Al titenes picho lachati es b'sarecha. Right. This is again. There's a number of verses in this chapter that are very cryptic. This one's pretty cryptic as well. But don't give your mouth over to make your flesh sin. The al tomar, and don't say lifnei hamalach. Don't say in front of the angel or in front of the messenger kishgagohi, that it was an accident. Lama yiktsofu Elohim al kolecha. Why should God get angry at the sound of your voice? V'chibel es maaseh yadecha, and then come and destroy your property. I'm just going to read. The Art Scroll says, "Let not your mouth bring guilt on your flesh." Right. Again, this is presumably from taking a vow and not fulfilling it, or saying something that's not good. Do not tell the messenger that it was an error. Right, which I think is just saying, don't try to pass it off as like, oh, it was my mistake, right? Take ownership over over what you say and the misdeed. And then he says, why should God be angered by your speech and destroy the work of your hands? Right. I saw an interesting comment that that on a certain level, when you take a vow and you don't fulfill it, to some degree, you're taking away from God in some capacity, whatever that means. And so here it ends up being a mita keneged mita. It ends up being a measure for measure response that God will take away some things of yours. That's pasuk 5. Kibirov chalomos, right? So now we're going to engage with dreams again. Kibirov chalomos vahavolim udvarim harbe ki es Elohim yira. Another very cryptic verse. Art Scroll says, in spite of all dreams, futility, and idle chatter, rather fear God. I had some notes on this. Give me a second. Yeah, so I saw 3 different translations. One is more that dreams and vanities all contain many words, which I think points to, again, the issue of being too quick and too not careful enough with what you say. I also saw a translation that's in spite of dreams, futility, and idle chatter, fear God, meaning the emphasis of the verse is fear God, despite the fact that dreams are disjointed and there's frivolity in the world and there's idle chatter, right? Despite all of that, be sure to fear God. And the one that makes sort of the most sense in English, but doesn't feel as literal, is much dreaming leads to futility and idle talk. So I don't really know what to make of that.
But I
But,
think he's migrated into Proverbs here, and this
Okay.
whole chapter strikes me as very proverbial. But I
Mhm.
think there's a parallel to this in the first chapter, where in the first chapter the world of nature is sort of chaotic, and
Okay.
it's repetitious, but it's wild. The wind and the sea and this and that. And here he's saying humans are surrounded by vanities and dreams,
Okay.
and these are word storms, if you will, like this chaotic inner life that we have can lead you in a lot of bad directions because it's disjointed, unfathomable, and don't let that master you. Don't let that be your guide.
Nice. Right. Despite all of that, fear God.
Yeah,
Right. That's
exactly.
where the truth comes in. Good. I like that. I like that. Something that seems true of all of these translations and that fits with the rest of the chapter, though, just on top of what you're saying, is he's associating talk with the fleeting, right? He seems to equate idle chatter with fleetingness, with havalim, and with dreams, which we know are also by their nature fleeting and not so tied to reality. So he associates talk with the fleeting and also that it's divorced from reality. Which I think can happen when we get too lost in what we're saying, when we're not being careful about what we're saying, right? It's easy to lose, it's easy to get divorced from reality through that. But good. Okay. So 7 is an interesting one. Right now, we're going to shift gears a little bit to a new topic, right? We're moving on from be careful with your words and be careful with vows. We're in verse 7. Im oshek rosh vegezel mishpat votzedek tir'eh v'medina. If you see oppression of the poor and the suppression of justice and right in a country, al titma ala chayfetz. Right, here's chayfetz again, right? But don't be so puzzled by it. Don't be astonished at the fact that it happens. Ki gavoa me al gavoa shomer ugvoim alehem. So this is interesting, right? Because there's a hierarchy, right? There's one higher than high who watches, and there are high ones above them. So there's 2 big divergent pshatim that I found in this. One pshat is more in line with Rashi, and I guess maybe the classical commentaries, that here it's saying, don't be too astonished because ultimately God rules over all. And I guess there's an assurance that eventually God will take care of everything and God will sort out the oppressor and the oppressed. I think that's more how the classical commentaries do it. What is more compelling to me on a pshat level, and it seems to be how a few of the translations I looked at treat it. What does Mechon Mamre say? How does Mechon Mamre translate the end of this verse?
For one higher than high watches, and they're higher than they.
Okay, so nice and vague. Nice
Yes.
and vague. But the implication being that don't be surprised when you see, essentially at a governmental level, when you see oppression, don't be surprised because there's a hierarchy within that government. There's one who's higher up, who's protecting the one below, and there's higher ups even above them that are protecting them, right? That there's a whole network of protection within the government for various ministers, and that, you know, it's less comforting, right? In one version of this, it's sort of don't worry too much because God will sort it out, and the other one is don't be confused about that because that's what happens in government. I guess.
Yeah, but that's not protection.
What do you mean?
Your use of protection, it says oppression, that's the first thing it says.
Well, protection for the oppressor, not good
I see, I
protection.
see.
Yeah. You're
Well,
right.
But
Yeah.
This is one of the painful
Yeah.
things we have to put up with.
Yeah, I was going to say, did everyone hear Kressel? Kressel said it's
Go ahead.
unfortunate. Kressel said, yeah,
that's unfortunate, but it's also true.
right. It makes more sense to me also because it does seem like,
Oh,
it seems like in any power structure,
Love the Rashi.
the Rashi, yeah.
To
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
I don't know. Why should I doubt that it's true? I have faith that it's.
Okay, good. We hope that we can do better. Unfortunately, oppression seems to be a very common thing, a phenomenon among people, especially when we start setting up hierarchies of power. The one thing I'll say as sort of I guess as a modern person, I think one of the things to take away from that is that we shouldn't be surprised even when we see it in our own ranks and in our own societies, right? Because we would like to believe that we're building the best societies that we can, and I hope we are, and I think in many ways we are, but also we ourselves will fall prey to these dangers of power. And I think, you know, if we're able to know that it's almost inevitable, then we can recognize it even when we ourselves are involved in it, and then we can correct course and hopefully try to minimize it. That's my very modern take on this verse. The more straightforward take on this verse, commentaries that I saw point out the fact that he doesn't really give a solution here. He just sort of says that this is the way it is, and there's no real engagement with the idea of changing it, which is interesting.
And he was king, and I hope he didn't oppress the poor.
Yeah, right. He was the highest up in the government. So
I think it's saying this is a permanent part of the human condition, is that you will have to live with watching others suffer. And I think truer words were never spoken. I hate to say it, but I think if you look at Kohelet as saying this is like the way it really is, this is a big part of it. And I think as you continue in the book, this happens more, where he says you're going to see these very ugly part of human life, and you're powerless to change it. And you must, I don't know if you have, maybe you don't have to accept it, but you have to acknowledge it.
yeah, acknowledge, I think, is good. Accept it is a lot harder, especially because I think largely in Judaism, I think we do try to take the position that we can make things better and that it's our job to try to make things better, right? I think in many ways, we're not a religion that just sort of accepts the world as it is. With that said, we're a religion of balance, and within reality, there are certain realities that we have to engage with. So Shlomo could be mentioning that without saying, here's how to change it, because maybe some of it is permanent, or maybe it's just not his agenda over here also, right? Like, you know, the Torah is going to teach you to be a good person. Meanwhile, you will be faced with people that aren't doing the right thing. That's also true at the same time.
Yeah, I think it's the renegade side of Kohelet, is he's saying,
Okay.
you know, the mitzvot are righteous based, and you should seek righteousness, but you know, you're gonna see this. This is gonna happen. And it's just as permanent as the sun and the moon.
Maybe. We hope not, but I hear you.
We do hope not.
Yeah. Good. Okay, another cryptic verse, verse 8, verse Ches. V'yisron eretz bakolhu, melech l'sadeh ne'evod. Our scroll says the advantage of land is supreme. Even a king is indebted to the soil, right? At the end of the day, even the king is going to have to answer for the harvest. And like, you know, if there's not a good harvest, then even the king doesn't get to eat much. What does Machon Mamre say for this verse?
It's a toughie. But the
Yeah.
prophet of a land every way is a king that maketh himself servant to the field.
Yeah, so that's more in line with the Sensino that I look at. That's that might be more literal. That might be more literal. It's a very tricky verse. JPS did an interesting thing with it. Okay, again, yeah, JPS says, thus the greatest advantage in all the land is his. He controls a field that is cultivated. It's tricky. It's a tricky verse. But what is clear is that I mean, again, the value of the land here is very important, right? Everyone relies on the land, and maybe the biggest signifier of power in that society is ruling over land. It's interesting that he says that now, because now we are going to switch into economic things. Okay, we've got a little more time, so we'll go a little further.
Is
Yeah.
it saying the prophet of the land every way is a king that maketh himself servant to the field? Is
Yeah.
it saying that God's in charge? Maybe,
How so? I
yeah.
like it, but how so?
How so?
Yeah.
Because a king that maketh himself servant to the field, so
Yeah.
that the king becomes a servant, and the field is God's land,
Interesting. Okay.
so
Good.
that the king becomes a servant to God.
Mm-hmm. There's a
Not
certain
sure.
humility there. There's a certain surrender to the world around.
Yeah, that he's not really the king isn't in charge. He's a servant.
Cool. Good.
Anyway,
Good.
that's
The Seder. Okay, but so he mentions the importance of land there, and now moves on to an anti-consumerism type orientation over here. Pasuk Tes, the 9th verse. Ohev kesef, lo yispa kesef. Right, a person who desires only money or silver, they'll never be satiated with silver. Ohev behamon lo tvua lo behamon lo tvua gamze havel. And a lover of abundance will have no wheat. And this is also hevel, right? This is also perplexing. That might be talking about the contradiction here, right? It is a contradiction. All I want is silver. I've got so much silver, and all I want is more silver, right? That's sort of a contradiction in human experience, that I've got all of this silver, and yet I can't stop desiring it more, right? That could be havel, or again, just going after these things in the first place might be havel. Birvos hatova ravu ochleho uma kishron levo leho kiim reus enov. Right, as goods increase, so do those who consume them. Right, meaning the more wealth you have, the more items you have, the more staff you might hire in your household, the more cousins you might have knocking on your door looking for some of it, the more people you'll have interested in engaging with your wealth. And so what benefit is there really to the one who owns all of this stuff? Ki'im re'us enav, besides just seeing it, right? You get a certain amount of pleasure from seeing the big stack of money, but that's about it, because you'll have people coming and taking this money. It's going to cause more problems than solutions. Misuka shnas ho'eved, right? The sleep of the worker is sweet. Im me'at v'im harbe yochel, whether or not he eats a little or a lot, right? Whether or not the food is plentiful, he's going to sleep well. Ve'asava le'oshir einenu maniach lo lishon. Whereas the satiation, or in this case, the amassed wealth of the rich person, einenu maniach lo lishon, is not going to let him sleep, right? He's going to be kept up all night worrying about, whether he's worrying about someone's going to come steal it, whether he's worrying about, oh, my competition is going to knock me out, whether he's worrying about, you know, the more possessions, the more worries over here. Good.
I
Okay.
think it's all very psychologically astute that
Okay.
we see this in life all the time, that, you know, wealth creates greed. It's really like literally true.
Yeah.
And we see that as people succeed, they often lose some of the simple joys of where they started. I think all this is like literally true. And this is very psychologically observed and astute. The greater your household, the greater your problems. It's like literally true. And it's universally true. And I think it's again, it reminds you of Proverbs and Pete's and Avos, like, you know, the more maidservants, the more gossip, the more food, the more worms. This is all ties into the worldview that, you know, the simple life is best. And often at the beginning of the journey, you're a lot happier than at the end, because building something is fun and watching it decay is not.
True. Well said. Well said. And we're going to see it. I think we won't see it today, but as we finish the chapter, he's going to go back he's going to come back to this idea that we've seen a few times now, where really what's good is to eat and to drink and to take pleasure in the work that you've done, and to understand that that's a gift from God, and that's one of the things that makes living life more worthwhile, even if it's not eternal.
I'm losing power. If you lose me, my computer just crashed. So don't worry about it.
No problem. We're going to be wrapping up. Just
okay, fine. Just in case.
Any final thoughts or questions before we close for the night?
No, again, I think this is really linked to Proverbs. It's very psychologically astute, and he's migrated in this very deep description of this worldview. His eyes are turning to other strictly human activities, where he has the same deep concerns about where's the game, what do you keep, you know, what's worth pursuing in life, and these are part of the real stuff of it. Is parnasa and how you are literally in the world.
Yeah, for sure. This later.
You asked me what I wanted to learn before. Now that Ethan has mentioned Proverbs, maybe I have something to do next.
That's interesting. We'll do a whole series of the Shlomo HaMelech books.
Oh, he
there he
left.
goes. There he goes. How's the weather? You got any big blizzards down there, Judy?
No, nothing. No, not at all. It's just been like 80, 90 degrees every day.
Nice.
There was a little bit of rain today. We went to a rainforest and it didn't rain in the rainforest. It's been really great. It's almost over.
Yeah. When are you coming
Days,
back?
I thought it was going to be really long and you know, that I wasn't going to be able to deal with it. We were in 3 different ports the last 3 days, and now we're at sea until Friday, and then we go to Cayman Islands and go snorkeling, and then Saturday we're at sea again, and then back on Sunday.
Sounds
so it's
pretty
almost
nice.
over.
Oh my
It's
God.
really nice. How's it by you? You've had some storms, haven't you?
Yeah. We're supposed to get a little more tonight, I think.
Okay, but it's not too bad, I don't think, huh?
No, it's not terrible.
Cressel, how are you there? Who's with mom?
My sister.
Okay, good, nice. All right, maybe I'll come next Wednesday to the to the shul.
Cool.
Yeah, so I'll miss you for Shabbos and for Tu B'Shvat tonight. Happy Tu B'Shvat.
That's what we got to play
You doing it?
roots over here.
I can't see.
Yeah, it's hard to, the
Is it
blurry is
dates?
funny, but
Dates. give me
grapes, dates, nuts, cookies.
Nice,
I had a-
good, good.
We should remember.
Okay.
Yeah,
S-
good call.
Have a good Simcha.
Alrighty.
Have a good Yom
Thank you, Judy.
Tov.
Enjoy.
Thank you. Okay, bye-bye. You too.
All right.